Welcome back. My name is Matt Reiners, and I am the co-founder of Eversound. And we were recently acquired by Uniguest, a company committed to developing engagement technologies to help communities connect and improve the quality of life for older adults. Today, I'm joined by Jacob Raptosh, the Divisional Sales Director at Holiday by Atria's West Division. Jacob and I have first met on LinkedIn, have engaged with each other's content, and are just big fans of what each other is doing. Jacob has been a sales leader, a director of sales and marketing, a regional sales director, and now a divisional sales director. Thanks for joining me today, Jacob.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Cool. So, Jacob, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got into senior living?
Yeah, for sure. So it all started about 10 years ago, actually in or around March of 2013. One of my former bosses, one of my former supervisors actually ended up coming to work as a recruiter for Holiday and had reached out to me and said, gosh, I know that this really isn't in your background. I was working in finance at the time and retail banking, basically. But she said, look, this would be a really good gig for you, especially with the customer service experience that you have. And she knew some of my backstory as well. I'd lived with my grandparents and taking care of both of them for a number of years in my kind of late teenage, early 20s. And so she really thought this would be a good fit. And as it turns out, it was. I started initially as a community sales manager for Holiday Retirement. Almost immediately fell in love with the job and fell in love with the industry. It's this kind of unique amalgamation of hospitality, conventional real estate, healthcare, a little sprinkle of family therapist, right? When you're working with multiple influencers and families. So it was just this great move. And honestly, I don't see myself doing anything any different. So I was a community sales manager for a number of years, and then later became the regional director of sales, still under the Holiday Retirement brand. I had 18 communities and 18 community sales managers that I actually managed directly. And then after the Atria transition, I was moved into the divisional sales director role, where I now support 60 of our communities on the Holiday by Atria brand on the West Coast, supporting the community sales managers, the general managers, the regional vice presidents, and then, of course, our senior vice president, Vicki Merriger. So it's been an interesting time in senior living, but like I said, a career choice that I can't fathom I would ever stray from.
Yeah, no, I love that story. And it sounds like it's a little bit more rewarding than working in that financial banking situation.
God, retail banking, God bless all the people
Yeah.
that do it, because it is boring at times.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I know you mentioned now you're overseeing teams that make up 60 senior living communities, which is wild. So apart from asking when you actually sleep, I am curious, like, what are your top performers doing differently?
Yeah. So, look, in my current role, it really is more influential the way that the organization is structured. Community sales managers report to general managers report to regional vice presidents. So I'm really kind of ancillary support on the side. When it comes to, though, our top performers, there are a handful of kind of key characteristics that you see sort of ubiquitously amongst all of them. They're behavioral, right? They have muscle memory when it comes to things like lead response, how they collaborate with their referral partners and outreach partners. They are sort of exceptional at efficiency and time usage. They're planners, right? So tour booking is, of course, one side of the equation, but even things like tour setup, prep, making sure we have thorough discovery, truly understanding why somebody is in front of you, and then finally making sure that those things are documented is really important. And so you tend to see in our top performers really strong behaviors, consistency in how they operate. And then, of course, they are natural people, right? People like them, which I think is also important. But again, that's not enough. There has to be the behavioral side of it if you have any hope of consistent high performance. But there are, I can look at all of our top performers and see similarities, finally, even in motivation, right? They want to be successful. They want to help people find solutions. It's important for them. They're naturally curious. So, that's sort of what we tend to see from our consistent high performers in the division.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And, it's kind of funny how some of those characteristics kind of are true in other even verticals too, of like what you find for the top performers. It seems to be, coming back to a lot. And I always like to consider myself being genuinely curious and just like better understanding stuff. Cause, there's no other better way to learn than asking questions. And I know one of the things we're going to dive deeper into here, is this idea of driving urgency and creating that sense of urgency. And, what do you find are the main challenges senior living communities face when they're trying to create a sense of urgency for potential residents and their families?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. I think often urgency creation can be confused with the concept of being pushy. And I think those are two very different things depending on how you execute. If we stipulate that people come to us to find a solution, that's why they reach out. And if you believe in your product, you believe in the value that your community, your team, your current residents bring to someone's life, you believe that they can live better at your community, then it's imperative for you to operate that way, right? So I think sometimes, especially kind of how we were raised, be polite, don't push back, don't be pushy, don't be salesy. It's such a bad word. But the truth of the matter is, if people, community sales teams, general managers, operators, if they are legitimately interested in finding solutions for people that have come to them seeking a solution, then I think it makes it much easier to separate between legitimately creating urgency for the purpose of finding a solution and being salesy or pushy, right? Those are two totally different things, depending on how the message is delivered and the behaviors that drive that process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, sometimes sales people get a bad rap, right? I think everyone kind of thinks of that
Really?
used car salesperson.
Yeah.
And, some of the times the urgency could be seen as, right, like pressuring or manipulative. And it's just not
Yes.
the case at all. And, I think, how do we find that balance between driving that urgency and genuinely helping families make the right decisions for their loved ones?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it's funny, I'll sort of tell you this little anecdote. As I became more comfortable in my position as a community sales manager, I would actually joke with families like, sitting in a room with a prospective resident and two adult influencers. I would even crack a joke like, oh my gosh, they've got you trapped in here with the terrible salesperson. Who knows what's going to happen next? Just to try to break the tension, because you're right. I think that people assume I'm going to be sold something that I don't want or that I'm not prepared for right now. But to answer your question, really, we have to earn the right to advise people on what they should do. And the only way that we can do that effectively is through really thorough discovery and building an intentional rapport with somebody. You can't suggest somebody lives in your community or present your community as the right fit for them until you've actually had lengthy conversations with people, understand why they're truly there, get the backstory, the history piece of it, understanding who's involved in the process, and then creating an environment where you really are matching up what your community does well or best with the needs that this person is telling you that they have. So it can seem disingenuous if you haven't done the legwork first. And so my conversation when I'm coaching community sales teams really is it should be all about the human person, right? Rates, availability, blah, blah, blah. We'll get there. I want to know about you. And again, you only earn that level of credibility where you can kind of tell somebody what they should do if you've taken the requisite time to understand why they're really there and understand the dynamics, the ensuing event or sequence of events that led them to your community in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's getting back to like understanding your customer and like really building that trust and the rapport to be able to do that. And, I know, you've mentioned about creating urgency in like 3 specific ways.
Yep.
Can you share those with us in no particular order?
Yeah. So, and look, right, I, of course, don't know everything, but I know over the course of my years in senior living, specifically on the community, you may have to ask that again. Sorry.
Yeah, all good. No fun.
1 second.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. We have a dog that's outside our house that's barking, which is causing our dogs to bark. Copper, quit. Sorry.
Cool.
Didn't ask that again. I apologize.
Yeah, of course, of course. Hey, no, it's all good. I've fallen out of my chair in one of these, so that's where the bar's at. So you're good. So when we're talking about urgency, Jacob, I know you have mentioned that there's 3 ways to help create that, and I'm curious if you can share those with us in no particular order.
Yeah, for sure. So, look, I don't, of course, claim to know everything. I know just in the amount of time that I was a community sales manager and then led community sales teams, you have to kind of break it down and focus on a few different ways to create urgency, to accelerate the sales cycle. Again, for the sole or at least partial purpose of finding a solution for somebody, right? We're all in sales. We got to hit our targets. We have to exceed our goals. But again, there's a part of this that really is based on finding solutions for families. So there's the concept of restrictive inventory, right? So here's an example. You have a community sales manager who happens to have 15 available apartments. It's very easy sometimes to start getting in a loop, showing too many options. You end up kind of confusing people. Even quite frankly, when families, I've had families walk in and say, well, just show me everything you've got, right? Anything that's available. The truth of the matter is you do somebody a disservice, in my opinion, by doing that. I think that tends to be the path of least resistance, to just walk somebody on a 90-minute visit, showing them 8 different apartments. If, however, you focus on the concept of restrictive inventory as it relates to discovery, right? So again, taking that former example, you have 15 available apartments. The truth of the matter is somebody that's in front of you has expectations, whether that's a specific floor plan style, size, budget, of course, is a big one. Understanding even something as sort of granular as location in the community, lighting exposure, all of those things matter to somebody. And again, this transition can be difficult enough. So it's only further compounded if they happen to move into an apartment that they don't actually like. So asking a lot of questions after that initial human discovery piece about what it is that's important to them and what it is they're looking for. The truth of the matter is, if done effectively, you can narrow it down to one option, right? So the conversation would go something like, Mr. Reiners, if I'm hearing you correctly, if I had a ground floor studio, preferably under $2,500 a month, with a private walkout for the dog that had a nice view, if I had something like that, are you telling me that that would check all the boxes? Right? So now not only is it a trial close, but I've also helped to center this lead on what it is that's important to them and what it is they're looking for. Mm-hmm. So if you have something like that, assuming you do, it makes it much easier to then say, listen, I've got great news for you. I've got the perfect option. Let's go take a peek at it, right? Rather than showing them a whole bunch of different apartment options that may or may not actually suit their needs. That's even important when you have somebody, let's say in that example, looking at a studio and they go, oh my gosh, this is so small. Before you, or whatever, right? Or this is for whatever reason doesn't work. Don't just start taking people, again, on a wild goose chase through a whole bunch of apartments. Pause the conversation, go back to what it is we discussed before. If I understood you correctly, Mr. Reiners, I thought that you had said, if I had an apartment with this, and this, that it would check all the boxes. Can you help me better understand what about this apartment doesn't or won't suit your needs? Mm-hmm. Even in the concept of urgency creation, and in that example, there are times where community sales managers will start showing maybe apartments that the lead cannot afford or that are outside the budget. Really, all you've done is created a hurdle, right, for them and for you. And so pausing and asking clarifying questions, Mr. Reiners, I'm happy to show you something with a little more space, but I want to make sure I didn't misunderstand. I thought that you had told me that the maximum budget was $2,500. Is that different? Right? So I'm still going to make sure, kind of in this concept of restrictive inventory, that we're not just going to start looking at other options. I either didn't ask the right questions, or perhaps there's a more expansive budget or something else that's going on, family willing to contribute, whatever the case may be. So that sort of sums up the idea of restrictive inventory. Then you have sort of urgency creation technique two, leveraging the catalyst, which is truly about what brought them in the first place. Often you'll get families that will, or prospective residents that will be interested in moving in, or maybe on a cognitive level know they need to, but emotionally it's difficult, or they throw up some sort of objection or delay. The truth of the matter is bringing it back to the catalyst, what drove them into the community before, and having that conversation with them again can often tend to lead you down a path where we're able to accelerate the timeline a little bit. Mr. Reiners, forgive me if I overstep, but I thought that you had told me that your father had fallen 3 times in the last month. We seem to have found kind of the perfect solution. I checked all the boxes and you're still saying you're going to wait. Can you unpack that for me? Help me understand how you've landed on that decision. So it's the idea of really understanding why somebody is in front of you and bringing it back to that original catalyst. And then finally, there's the idea of strategic use of incentives, discounts, allowances to create urgency. Nobody that I know likes to spend money unnecessarily. People like a deal for the most part. You could still build value around a deal, right? It isn't sort of fire sailing stuff. But I do think making sure when we're talking about the idea of strategic use of discounts and or allowances, that something as simple as annualizing it, right? Which I know is going to be really a rudimentary concept for people. If you tell somebody this apartment is on sale for $2,700 a month, they don't really know what that means, right? But if I go to you and say, Mr. Reiners, if I'm understanding you correctly, if I'm able to take this apartment, which normally rents for $3,000 a month, reduce it to $2,700 a month, which would save you $3,600 in your first year alone, and waive your new resident services fee or your community fee, if I were able to save you $6,300 in your first year alone today, are you telling me that you're prepared to execute a residency agreement at my community? So again, it's looping it back to a trial close, but I think sometimes, $300 a month off to somebody looking at a $3,000 apartment may not sound all that significant, but when you do something as basic as annualizing it, or even calculating it over the life of a potential stay, right? How long do you think your mom's going to live here? 5 years. Well, all of a sudden, that $3,600 becomes a much larger number, right? So if your mother were to live here for 5 years, here's what the deal I'm offering you today would save her. So I try to kind of center when I'm working with teams around one of those three or a combination of those three concepts to drive urgency, not just for the purpose of achieving goals or targets at the building, but again, for helping somebody who has come into your community asking for help, right? And to find a solution.
Right. And I think the important piece of those three things, right? It's not manipulative at all. It's actually helping these people, and how you hit that. Like there is a need there. And I would make the case that living in these communities is way better than someone living at home alone, or, in other situations. I saw it firsthand with my family. And you're just helping them to make that decision in a more timely manner. And it's for the best for all parties involved. And when we talk about these three different strategies, I know you mentioned like you work with your team to kind of identify and lean into one, but when would you prioritize one strategy over the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm always going to encourage my team to get thorough discovery, right? It is, anybody that has worked with me knows that is the hill I die on: granular, thorough discovery, catalyst, history, and key players. So when we talk about discovery, there's kind of three key components. Catalyst, what brought that person into your building, what event or ensuing sequence of events brought that person into your community in the first place, history, how long has that thing been going on for, right? Because often people don't walk into your building on the first fall, or they don't walk into your building the first time that, mom or dad struggles to do the laundry, or, struggles to cook for themselves. So that's the history piece. And then finally, the key players piece, right? Who is involved in this decision? Not just who's going to be my advocate as the community sales manager, community sales director, who in this equation am I going to partner with, but as well understanding who may not want this to happen and why. And it's almost equally important to understand the why somebody wouldn't want their loved one to be in your community. Sometimes it's a misconception. Sometimes there are other motivating factors, but always taking it back to intention and motivation is really important. So I'm always going to start there, right? That should be sort of the basis for how good salespeople operate. Speaking of the behavioral stuff we talked about earlier, right? Those high-performing CSMs, they are masterful at collecting really good discovery, down to someone's name, the name of their children, the name of their dog, right? Those things, while small, again, we're kind of using their common speak, right? We're becoming more familiar to them in a compressed period of time. So I'm always going to prioritize good discovery first. Yeah. Then it's going to be about what is most important to them, right? In the restrictive nature of inventory, I may only have 1 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment home that's available. And being bold and explaining to somebody, look, my community only has 12 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment homes available. The last time one opened was 7 months ago. Now that I understand the discovery side, Mr. Reiners, are you telling me that you're prepared to wait another 7 months, 8 months, year before you move? If not, then we need to have a conversation about the apartment, the available 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment home that I have today, right? So it really depends on what's motivating them. And then strategic use of discounts or allowances. Everybody wants to save money. So I would say, honestly, prioritizing first the thorough discovery piece, leveraging the catalyst to really kind of ask some tough questions of people. I've often said to the teams that I support, if you believe that somebody is not making a good decision, then respectfully and from a place of genuine, legitimate caring, have that conversation, right? You're the expert in senior living. For many families, if they've never gone through this process before, they really don't know what to expect and they don't know what could potentially happen. So leveraging the catalyst first is always going to be paramount. And then really, depending on the unique nature of the circumstances, figuring out, is some sort of economic motivation, so a customized, tailored financial solution, is that going to be what's most important to this family? Or is it, I only have one ground floor, 1-bedroom, with access to the courtyard, or whatever it is. So I always start with the discovery piece, with the leveraging catalyst piece first, and then we build out the strategy from there, whether that's going to be strategic use of discounts and allowances, or restrictive inventory, or quite frankly, some combination of all three. It just depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I think the customer and the consumer today is so much more informed. So the key is in discovery. You got to understand, we talk about the person-centered care of approach, but there's this person-centered care of sales, and really understanding the individuals and the pain points. And yeah, it makes total sense, because once you're able to identify that, it's kind of clear what the next steps will be for that person. Key is in the discovery, asking good questions and listening.
Well, and I do, if I may, I think the one other piece of it, right? If we're doing really thorough discovery, and let's say we're using some combination of those things to create urgency, and you still get a no. Now I know there's clearly some part of this that I'm not understanding. I clearly have not asked all the right questions, right? And saying something as simple as, Mr. Reiners, I feel like I owe you an apology over the course of the last 60 minutes, 90 minutes, however long we've been speaking. I feel like I've sort of found a solution for all of your concerns, and yet you're still saying no. Unpack that for me. Help me understand what questions I didn't ask that I should have, to better understand your decision today, right? It's all designed to, A, find a solution for that family. They're in front of you for a reason. And two, tighten that timeline up, because you're 100% right, Matt. Again, if we believe that people live better in our buildings, and I have seen it, I've helped hundreds of families through this transition. I am very close with residents that I moved in even 7, 8 years ago. I've seen how their lives were made better in our communities. And so if you believe and operate with that level of conviction, then you've really got to behave that way, even on the sales side.
Yeah. And having that belief in your product and what you're selling will, from what I've seen, because I've been in situations where I did not believe what I was selling, and, you don't go that extra step and ask that one more question about it. And then my last question here for you, Jacob, and arguably my favorite, but if you were to give other senior living providers 3 guiding principles as we move through the next 12 months, what would you say?
Yeah. Oh, man. I think sometimes something as simple as execution of the basics is lost, right? I think we try to come up with really creative ways to move the needle, and all of that's fine. Being inventive is a good thing in most cases, but staying really focused on execution of the basics, really rapid new inquiry response, right? Thorough discovery on the front end, making sure that our tour setups are appropriate, making sure that we have a plan. Even something as basic as referral partner collaboration. Look, referral partners that we work with, which most, if not all, senior living communities work with, they are partners. They're business partners of ours, right? And I think sometimes we fail to really acknowledge what should that relationship look like, and what does the idea of mutual accountability and equivalent ownership look like. I've worked with some community sales managers who maybe never communicate with their referral partners. And I can tell you, you see it in the performance, right? You see it in the type of relationships that they build. So really understanding going forward the next 12 months, things that I know I'm going to be focusing on, it's execution of the basics on the front end. It's making sure that we are continuing to work with and expand our referral partners and our outreach partnerships. That's a high priority. And then finally, it's the concept of accountability, right? In the end, good, bad, or indifferent, sales is a uniquely objective discipline. Did I hit the number or not? And in the end, building out an accountability strategy stemming from these kind of ideas of execution at the basics, expanding our outreach and referral partnership relationships. If you're doing those things well and with intention, then the accountability piece should be easy, right? Again, it's behavioral. I've always broken it down to kind of one of two things. It's effort or messaging, right? If the behaviors are right, if the effort's there, then it's very easy as a sales leader, right? Somebody who leads a sales team, it's very easy to identify the opportunity if the performance doesn't follow. It's in messaging. It's in how we're delivering the conversations with families. It's in the questions that we ask and the discovery that we do. So staying focused on those 3 things, execution of the basics, staying focused on expanding outreach and partnership relationship, and then finally accountability. I think, at least for me, that's going to be sort of the name of the game for the next 12 months.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Jacob, so much wisdom in this conversation. Thank you so much. I feel like I'm ready to move into a senior living community now. You
got a good deal for you.
Times there. Yeah. Yeah. Hey, if you can give me 10% off an annual, we can make it happen.
There you go.
Thanks so much, Jacob. The industry is in a much better spot because of people like you, attacking sales from a good heart and a good perspective. So thank you for all that you and your team are doing. And thanks for spending some time with us here today.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Again, Matt, thank you for making this happen. Like I said, I've just been a fan of watching your content as well. So I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much.
If you'd like to know when we post the next episode, make sure to subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're interested in how Eversound can help improve the quality of life in your community, find out more at eversoundhq.com.